I just hope that we can make a push where people don't just talk about the 400 years, but talk about what the 400 years left behind in all of our families.
That's right. No, that's real, my brother. That's very, very real indeed.
Fam, just a heads up.
I see my sister here too.
Yeah.
Is that Sister Kim?
Yeah, that's Kim right there.
Yeah, because they had a big thing.
And shout out, fam. So we are.
Indeed, but now,
I just hit the live button.
Brother Tone and Sister Yvette on it.
So shout out to everyone that's here. We are going live right now. With and again, I want to welcome everybody to this amazing 4th of July broadcast. I don't think I have to introduce the brothers on the screen. You will know them by their face. But of course, I will do a formal introduction. But again, welcome everybody. I'm Chris. By the way, Chris with ADOS Sacramento. I'm going to put up the names in a second. We are live streaming right now for a special 4th of July, or 4th of July, right? Broadcast on 2 different YouTube channels right now. So right now we're on Tone Talks channel. I want to give a shout out to Antonio Moore Tone Talks, and then we're also on the ADOS CA Media channel as well. Welcome, fam. We are here for a live special broadcast to talk about ADOS and the 4th of July, about our people and the 4th of July, about us as a people and where we are going and where do we go from here. I'm Chris with ADOS Sacramento. Once again, I'm joined by my co-host here, Kim, with ADOS Sacramento as well, and ADOS California, as well as Umoya, which is probably to my right or to your left. Umoya Glass, also with ADOS Sacramento and ADOS California, and absolutely honored to have 2 very, very special guests here right now. I want to start with Mr. Dr. Cornell West, who many of you already know, but who is an African-American ADOS political activist, social critic, author, public intellectual, one of my heroes and one of my political superheroes, as I just told them, grandson of a Baptist minister. Dr. West focuses on the role of race, gender, and class in American society, and the means by which people act and react to their quote unquote radical conditionedness, as we say. A radical Democrat and a socialist, a social democrat. Dr. West draws intellectual contributions from multiple traditions, including Christianity, the Black Church, Marxism, neo-pragmatism, and transcendentalism. Among his most influential books are Race Matters and Democracy Matters. Dr. West is an outspoken voice in left-wing politics here in these United States, and as such has been critical of members of both the Democratic Party, including former President Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, rightfully so. He has held professorships and fellowships at Harvard University, Dartmouth College, Princeton University, Yale University, Pepperdine, Union Theological Seminary, and the University of Paris during his esteemed career, and he's still going. He is also a frequent commentator on politics and social issues in many, many outlets. Fam, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Cornell West. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you. Definitely.
And obviously the brother to his left, I believe, probably your right, is none other than Antonio Moore. Is an attorney, is a UCLA grad, is an award-winning filmmaker, director of Freeway Crack in the System. If you haven't checked that out on Netflix right now, go check out Freeway Crack in the System. He's a writer, and most importantly for this conversation, he is the co-founder of #ADOS, along with Yvette Cornell, Breaking Brown, Tone Talks. Antonio Moore is co-founder of #ADOS. ADOS hashtag ADOS is the leading reparations movement in the country right now. It is the energy behind the reparations movement right now. It is the reason why all the candidates have to talk about reparations. It's the reason why the Congress has been moving toward reparations. Antonio and of course Yvette and the ADOS family, welcome. Appreciate you being here. Also Tone.
Thank you so much. Again, I'm just one of the producers of that film, not the director. But I do want to say again, as I said off camera, thank you to Dr. Cornell West. He's made himself available to ADOS in a very, very powerful way. Came to our conference and didn't spend just an hour. He spent the whole day supporting speakers from across the country. He didn't have to do that, and we just appreciate you, man. We appreciate what you did, stepping out and saying the truth about Obama when everyone else wouldn't. We appreciate your message on reparations and the Black agenda. We appreciate you and your body of work. In addition, I want to say that we have almost 1,000 people in the chat on my channel. We're gonna at different points, if you just add questions, I'll try to jump over if I see a good one and bring you in, because this is a live dialogue. We're hoping to get about anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 people watching this live. Let's get this discussion going. And also, let me say this to you guys. Thank you so much, ADOS California. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Omola, for putting this event on. I mean, you guys are taking your 4th of July. You guys probably have family and kids you need to be with. And this is the body of work that we hoped when we started this movement.
Thank you, Fan. I appreciate you, Tone. Appreciate you for creating the actual space, right? For this conversation, creating the energy behind the movement. One of the things that I was speaking to Dr. West about before we came on is how we were so inspired by the work of yourself and Yvette Cornell of Breaking Brown that we got active on the ground, right? And this is what's different about you and Yvette, is that you have inspired everyday, ordinary Black folks to get up and get in the fight for reparations now. We're a new generation of advocates, right? We're very 21st century. We're very digital, so. And we are making a lot of great momentum around reparations, not just here in California, but also nationwide. So thank you, Tone, and again, thank you, Yvette. And also, I want to give a shout out to the folks in the chat. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to Tone's channel, subscribe to our ADOSCA channel as well. Follow us, follow Tone on Twitter. And again, thank you to the ADOS groups and ADOS chapters all around the country. This is really a group effort. We're all fighting for the same thing. We're all fighting the good fight for reparations. And I'm proud, and I always say I'm always proud and humbled to be working with such amazing activists and amazing organizers. I feel really, really lucky. And I'll say this, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I feel like we've already all made history, right? It's just now, what does it say about us? What do the pages say, right? And so, with that'll be our introduction. Let's get right into the discussion. We have a few questions, but we really want this to be a dialogue and a conversation with Dr. West, who's our feature here. But I want to open it up with just one question to you, Dr. West, and then we can take it away, and take it around to you, Tone. Should African Americans, ADOS, in your opinion, the descendants of slavery, those of us who built the country, should we be celebrating this day, the 4th of July?
Well, let me just start off by saying I want Brother Tone to be center stage. Though. I mean, he's visionary leader. He's co-founder with our dear sister Yvette. And so, Brother Tone, please, you be center. You come in anytime you want, reflecting, questions, queries, and so forth. Very, very important. I want to salute you, Brother Chris, for facilitating this. Sister Kim, thank you so much. And it's really Brother Glass, his brother Moya. When he calls, I come running. His father and I grew up together. We were on the same baseball team together. His father's the deepest athlete to come out of Sacramento. I don't know whether you all know that. You know, I grew up in Sacktown.
I don't know.
You didn't know that, huh? Oh, yeah, his name was Leland Glass. You look that up. He's in the history book. He's one of the deepest to come out. He, my brother, actually, Cliff, was the greatest track star, and he was the greatest baseball and football player. And we had a chance to talk yesterday. It brought so much joy to my heart. But see, Sacktown's my hometown. See,
right on.
8 years in Glen Elder, that's on the chocolate side. Then 2 years Southland Park Drive. Mom is still there. Her birthday was yesterday. She's 88 years young, so you know I got a smile on my face. But Cliff and Cynthia and Cheryl, everybody's there in my family. But me, I got lost in translation on the East Coast, but still swinging. But I think we ought to start off though, really, very, very briefly, with Frederick Douglass, July 5th, 1852, Corinthian Hall, the ladies' anti-slavery gathering. And what did he say? Your celebration is a sham. He said, you boast of liberty, an unholy license. Your national greatness, swelling vanity. You see, that's what Trump and company need to understand. He said that then. America great, swelling vanity. Then he went on to say, when it comes to revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America has no rivals. That's 1852. So this is not just hypocrisy as we know. This is levels of barbarity that have to do with precisely what Brother Tone and Sister Yvette and others, Brother Coates has talked about this. Now Hannah Jones is talking about this, the plunder, the plunder, the plunder, the plunder. When we get those facts out, then the question becomes, how do we intervene? What we gonna do? But for me, you see, I proceed with the primacy of the moral and the spiritual. And what I mean by that is we as a people, a black people, no one has ever been hated for 400 years in such a chronic way. And yet we still teach the world so much about how to love. Love of beauty, our music. Love of the holy in our churches and mosques and synagogues and other religious ways of expressing ourselves. Our love of goodness. You can do that and be agnostic and atheistic, you see. Love of freedom. And so one of the reasons why I'm just so blessed to always be with someone like Brother Tone and Sister Yvette is that when it comes to the moral and the spiritual, you're talking about integrity and honesty, you're talking about empathy. Most important, you're talking about who has a genuine love of black people. And the love of black people comes in a lot of different forms. There's no one organization that has a monopoly on love of black people, but we have to have vision. We have to have an analysis. I just heard Mr. Louis Farrakhan for 3 hours today. He spoke right there in the farm in Michigan. I just had an interview with Final Call. Now, I got a lot of deep disagreements with the minister, but I know his hatred of white supremacy, his love of Allah tied to love of black people, and my love of him is deeper than the disagreements. So I'm honest about the disagreements. I'm a revolutionary Christian. He's Muslim. He got his views about ways in which the world operates and women and Jews and gays and lesbians, and we go at each other tooth and nail. But we have worked together and we will work together because my love for him is unstoppable. I say exactly the same thing about Brother Tone. The brother ain't no fake. He ain't phony. His heart is in the right place. That's the primacy of the moral and the spiritual. Now, I got some Marxist brothers and sisters who got their hearts in the right place. You got different kind of analysis and so forth. Even some of the neoliberals that I'm very critical of. But if they'll help Brother Jamal and Letitia in a certain kind of way, I'm going to be there with them.
Come on.
I'm just going to keep pushing them. So that's, I think, the spirit that is very important at this unprecedented historical moment for us to be able to come together. I learned much from Brother Tone. I learned much from Sister Yvette. I just heard her give a critique of the 1619 essay that was in the New York Times. I learned from that. I'm empowered by that. My attempt to be a force for real good in the language of John Coltrane, and you know, he's benchmark for me, and Curtis Mayfield and Nina Simone, they my benchmark. You see, they set the standards in terms of deep love, in terms of willingness to serve, sacrifice, tell the truth, and most importantly, do what Ado is doing on the ground, keep grassroots activity going so that our conception of Black freedom always embraces in a significant way reparations concretely understood. We thank God for Brother Garrity and the others bringing their intellectual and analytical tools. We thank Brother Tone and Sister Yvette bringing their intellectual and analytical tools that help us understand this fundamental component of a great people who have created the greatest tradition in the modern world in terms of dealing with catastrophe, but keep dishing out creativity and compassion, keep dishing out love warriors. And these love warriors are not summer soldiers. We're not talking about lifestyle. These love warriors are all-time love warriors, willing to give life, death, energy, whatever skills we have, and always preserving our style and our smiles. You see, putting a smile on grandmama's face and granddad's face. So the answer to your question, though, brother, should we be celebrating? We should be celebrating Black humanity, Black creativity, Black freedom, and the ways in which we get there, and keep track of the levels of barbarity and hypocrisy that's been part of the history of the nation. Now, granted, we got a whole host of Black people, including my father. My father fought in Korea, you see? So that if he's fighting, carrying that flag, and my mother wants to put the flag out because she's loving her husband, my dad, I can understand her putting that flag out. I'm not going to do it, but I can understand her putting it out. And of course, I'll take a bullet for her. I didn't say a bullet in the leg either. I'm talking about bullet right here. So in that, so the sense of, okay, if she want to put the flag out on the 4th, because we got a long history of 200,000 soldiers, Black soldiers, joining the Union Army to break the back of the Confederacy. It was Black people that won the war, pushed the Union Army over, even though white supremacy will win the peace up until the present moment, you see. So I understand a number of Black folk who want to put the flag up, but for the most part, you know, I'm with Brother Colin and Brother Eric and the others. I'm not that crazy about the flag. But I understand Black folk who are. They're not my enemies, my foes. So if they want to celebrate, fine. But they can see in their celebration ways of connecting it to loving Black folk, fighting for Black freedom, fighting for Black liberation, and we hope fighting for reparation. Let me just stop there, though. But
Dr. West, thank you for that. Actually, Tone, I wanted to throw it to you. If you want to address the same thing or pick up on anything that you heard Dr. West say, please, fam, take it away.
Ultimately, the question, and you'll have to excuse me, at some point I'm going to have to plug in the phone because I thought it was going to come through the laptop. I'm going to have to come through the phone. I'm going to have to plug it in. Ultimately, the question is going to be, can you both celebrate and critique something at the same time? So we look at Mississippi as this classic example. They have changed the flag and finally got rid of the Confederacy in their flag. But they have done nothing for parchment while these men die in those Mississippi prisons built by Mississippi hands that were slaves at one point. My family owns property in Mississippi. That my brother is on deployment right now in the Navy. So the Black experience is ultimately a question of how do you celebrate something that you need to critique so harshly? And I think for a lot of people, we get into this philosophical discussion about feelings and everything else, and forget the egos we ate this morning, or the person that works at that factory in Mississippi, or how Detroit and the Ford factories built your communities. So I have to look at it in a way where it's a very, as Dr. West pointed out, nuanced conversation. I think for the slave, it was much more flat in the sense that they were absolutely enslaved. For us, as we go through this whole process of America promising a freedom that didn't come because we didn't have money for the lunch counter, as Dr. King said so eloquently, we have families that built homes in Atlanta, Georgia, in Los Angeles, California. But now we have young people who can't afford homes in that same city of Los Angeles or Atlanta. And we have to begin to question why. So when I look at the why, I look at the last 20 to 30 years of politics and ask ourselves, how did we elect a Black president and end up without Black politics? Can we pull up the chart with the 2 lines and the wealth? Because I just want to frame what I'm saying. So when we look at wealth, white America has $100 trillion today. We still are at 2.5, 2%, with a chunk of that in the hands of Black immigrants that recently migrated. But the issue is, when Obama came into office, whites only had 65 trillion. So literally over the course of his presidency, through quantitative easing, he boosted them up to 90 and $95 trillion of wealth. Well, if you voted for Obama and you got his pictures up, I don't understand how you can be the same person that critiques a person who has a family member on deployment that celebrates 4th of July. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I think ultimately the 4th of July represents that ultimate conflict of the Black existence, in the sense that we were never made whole. And that is the point of reparations, not just wealth and money, but to rectify a long-lasting original sin, with not just a recognition of where we should be at wealth-wise, whereby you can read it in Dr. Derry's book, From Here to Equality. We should go from $100 trillion average worth to the 900 that white people have. But more so where we should be placed at in the society, beyond just being Black Americans, but being ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, the institution. That's and we'll get into more of the discussion.
So thank you for that, Tone, as well. Hopefully, folks were able to see the chart that we had up. I actually want to ask Dr. West, is there anything that you want to respond to that Tone said that you just heard?
I'm gonna grab extension cord.
I think one of the crucial points that I think Brother Tone is making here is the centrality of wealth. See, for so long we've been talking about access to income. We've been talking about access to symbolic representation. We've been talking about access to a certain kind of status. But for me, the two most crucial features are always, first, self-respect, tied to self-love, and wealth. Because I've always believed that it's really poverty and lack of self-love that is set at the center of our plight and predicament. And so once you start talking about wealth, then you're going to have an analysis of the economy, an analysis of how, in fact, wealth is produced, who produces it, who gains access to that wealth. And for so long, we really haven't really focused on wealth in the way in which we ought, especially within our mainstream politics. It's all about status and income. But when you really start talking about wealth, then you're talking about the most entrenched interests, the most crucial corporate powers, and then their relation to the politicians, their relation to the educational system, their relation to how the churches and mosques and synagogues operate. And you see, once you raise that issue of wealth, you're getting right at the core of the way in which the system operates. Just like when you talk about self-love and self-respect, you're getting at the core of the psychic dimensions of white supremacy. And the two are tied together. They're not identical. They tied together. And so I love the way Brother Tone and Sister Yvette and Brother Garrett and others get us to talking about wealth in a very serious kind of way, and how do we gain access to that wealth.
And Dr. West, can I jump in? Hey, Chris, pull up the chart with the blue lines, because I want to make sure that we frame exactly what he's saying. We did a great discussion less than 2 weeks ago about the financial wealth divide using the Federal Reserve data. What we know is that white America has $20 trillion in just liquid wealth. Out of that 100, $20 trillion of it is liquid wealth. The whole of Black America has $350 billion of liquid wealth. That's stocks and also cash money on hand. 350 billion. 20 trillion, 350 billion. There are 83 million white homes and there's 20 million Black homes. That is not a ratio that is in line. So what we start running into is, what about within race? And this goes to exactly what Dr. West was just talking about. No one has been talking about what does it look like within race, within Black America. So we have these Black celebrities trying to get woke since COVID started, but we don't want to deal with the fact that when you look at this race, and even the 2.6% of wealth that we do have. We have 2.6% of the national wealth. 75% of that 2.6 is in our top 10% of families. 90% and 90% is in the top 20% of families. Now, those are largely retirees and boomers, but that top 10 is also part Black celebrity. The bottom half of the race is living on negative $200 billion. Negative wealth for the bottom half of your race. The reason why this is important is because the narrative of ADOS experiences is being concentrated in these Black families that are forced to live under America. So now 4th of July comes around and the conundrum comes to fruition, particularly in COVID. We know in COVID, we've seen 1 in 4 Americans lose their job. Well, if 1 in 4 general Americans lost their job, it might have been 1 in 2 Black folk. These Black folk that live entirely on labor, have no inheritance and no savings, need to be able to work for a living. The question that Cornell brings about, that the 4th of July brings about, is not only about white generally oppression, but about white oppression acting through our own people at times. So this top group, are you going to advocate not just when BET has a great moment about Black lives, or not just when COVID comes around? Are you going to advocate consistently for the rest of Black America? Or are you just trying to sell that to Nissan or to Uber or to any other corporate interest?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to add, I know we're going to get back to your question, but just to add to this, because this is so very important. You see, I learned something on 9th Avenue, Shiloh Baptist Church in Oak Park in Sacramento. We had the Black Panther Party, was just right down the way, Mark Tima and the other. And what I learned from Reverend Willie P. Cook was, you look at the world through the lens of the least of these.
Come on.
You don't measure success in terms of those who are doing well. You measure the success of any group, any community, in terms of those who are catching hell, in the name of Malcolm X. So that the last thing we needed, and this has been in place for 40 some years, that when people talk about Black progress, the benchmark is usually the Black professional class, the Black educated class, those who gain access to formal education. There's a whole lot of street education. We know that's very real. Because I mean, James Baldwin now went to college, but 2 colleges went through him. Ain't no college graduate of African descent could write like James Baldwin, the son of Harvard. So we know it's just not a matter of formal education. But formal education provides you with a diploma, that UCLA graduate degree that Brother Tone got, that gives him access to certain kind of opportunity. My degree give me access to certain kind of opportunity. But Shiloh Baptist Church taught me that I have got to be just a conduit and venue through which my gifts can be used as ways of enhancing the least of these. What you do to the least of these, you do unto me. Now, Willie P. Cook took that seriously. I did too. Sunday school, vacation Bible school, all of that. So we ended up with the breakfast programs for brothers and sisters, not just in Sacramento, but all around the country with the Black Panther Party. You see, we ended up going to the prisons. The measure of your church is not going to be the building fund. It's going to be how strong is your prison ministry? What are you doing for the elderly? What are you doing for the children who are unchurched but still are in your community? That's a moral and a spiritual question that leads to the kind of fundamental focus that you see in Brother Tone and Sister Yvette and Garrity and others. And so it's a different lens through which you're viewing the world. Now, Martin Luther King Jr. is one example of that. Malcolm X, another example. Bell Hooks is Buddhist, even though she grew up Baptist, but she's Buddhist now. But she got the same lens. There's different ways in which you get at it in this way, you see. And that is the crucial question that is being raised. And then what has happened is that the specificity of what used to be called the Negro plight has been lost in a large homogeneous notion of Blackness. Because you got a lot of beautiful Black folk out there, magnificent Black folk out there. But if you miss out on those who have been enslaved, Jim Crow, Jane Crow, generation after generation after generation, then it's easy to lose sight of their particular plight under a category of Blackness. And this is not anti Black immigrant. This is not anti-African immigrant. As moral and spiritual persons, we embrace everybody. But at the same time, we're not going to lose sight of the 243 years of enslavement in this land.
And Dr. West, let me add to that.
Called American terrorism, Jim Crow and Jane Crow in this land, and then the new Jim Crow in this land, generation after generation. And we do have to come up with a language and a way of talking about this so that people don't think we are trashing immigrants or trashing Africans or trashing anybody. And there are ways of saying, look, we're beginning in our own space, our backyards, our own mamas and daddies and cousins and brothers and sisters who we grew up with. Like Leland Glass, we on the same baseball team. That brother's not just a fellow baseball player, he's my brother. And I got to make sure I embrace he and his wife and his kids and everything else without in any way casting it over against others, but making sure they have their rightful place. Because
Dr. West, this is the conundrum of the moment. And again, this is all these different conflicts. What you have, and excuse any of the fireworks. Everybody got fireworks going on this 4th. I don't know what's going on, Dr. West. All the cities.
Now, you are in Los Angeles, though, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah. And so this is the conundrum of that statement. The most inviting Black people in America have been American Blacks, ADOS. The reason why I say that is because a nation of Black folks that spans from California to New York never set up tribes. Not only that, but when the shift happened in Black immigration, we never set up policy saying we don't want them here. We actually allowed them open-armed into our space to play act as Harriet Tubman without even asking, who are you? Where do you come from? But let's go a step further. Let's look at Minneapolis, Minnesota. I did a show on it. Minneapolis, Minnesota is the home of a large group of Somalian immigrants. No problem with that. But Minneapolis, Minnesota never invited ADOS. You can see the lens of this discussion best through Ilhan Omar and George Floyd. So Ilhan Omar comes here in '94. There's federal programs for people from asylum to get $600 a month for 8 months, and they get $1,000 when they get here. George Floyd, a felon from the South that wanted to come to Minnesota, a Minnesota that didn't want to deal with Black folks, the ADOS folks, and had redlining to make sure they didn't come from Chicago, that disinvited us, had invited Ilhan Omar. And I'm not talking about fault right now. I'm just talking about what he is. So when George Floyd comes to Minnesota, Minneapolis, he got to work for Salvation Army. This is what happened. From Deep South, from slavery, $8, $10 an hour, working at Salvation Army as a security guard. So when we find George Floyd, it's with an accused $20 counterfeit bill, a poverty crime. But he wouldn't do that if he had reparations. And he wouldn't do that if he could apply to the asylum program. And so what we have as a conundrum is that the very divisions that we talk about are already built in place for that Somalian asylum receiver because George can't apply to her programs. We almost have to say that these are our programs just to get that recognition and then be called divisive. Now, if you want to flatten everything out and let George Floyd apply for the asylum program, I'm with that too. But I haven't heard that advocacy from the Somalian asylum immigrant. And I haven't heard that advocacy in different countries. We talk about the back home to Ghana. So many Black folks are talking about the back home to Ghana. What they're seeing is that when you get to Ghana, Ghana isn't really talking about home. They're talking about tourism. So I guess the problem right now is there's a significant demand on us to be open-armed when we've always been open-armed in a way that the rest of the Black global society doesn't act on their own. In Africa, we know the realities of South Africans with Zimbabweans. We know the realities between Caribbean nations. But then in terms of us, there's this whole thing that we are being divisive, only acting on that same reality of we need our interests met. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, I do. No, that's a very, very powerful point. that you're making, because I mean, and you all tell me what you think about this, that the whole overturn of white supremacist immigration, which is a shift from 1924 to 1965, was a result of the Black Freedom Movement.
Yes, it was.
We had some allies, but the Black Freedom Movement was pushing that issue. See, so we did embrace people from all around the world.
All around the world.
Even from Asia. They were from all around the world, because it was only the particular European nations of a certain sort that gained access to the United States. And so when we opened it up in 65, it had to do with that love overflowing that I talked about.
Yep.
What Larry Graham called overlove in Sly Stone's group, you see. I'm overloving. You see, that's the history of Black folks, just emptying ourselves, giving ourselves, both to Black folk, but to everybody. That's why our Black Freedom Movement has been the leaven in the American democratic experience. When something is done for us, other folk can jump in on it. The feminists can jump in, the gay brothers, lesbian sisters, precious trans folk can jump in, and all of them usually use much of what we have done in our spirit and our policy as a basis of their enhancement. So that when they do get here, the question becomes, will they be reciprocal and mutual and acknowledge the degree to which they might gain access to benefits that Black folk, when I say Black folk here, I'm talking about ex-Negroes.
ADOS.
There you go. Just ADOS. That's dang it, just ADOS gathering thing.
Dr. West, you better remember you at ADOS. You got your
I apologize.
shirt. Dr. West, you got your shirt.
Like that, you know, I used to call it Negroosity. You know,
yeah, we had to come up with it, Dr. West.
ADOSity. I mean, when we talk about folk who just been enslaved, Jim Crow, but still have tremendous dignity. And there's another level of this that we also don't like to talk about, which is the way in which the whole culture has been ADOSified, which is to say Afro-Americanized, in the music, in the way the young people walk, the way the young people talk, who the heroes are. We talking about on vanilla sides of town, who their heroes are. From
Dr.
Prince,
West, the way Barack Obama talked.
To Jay-Z, to Beyonce.
Barack Obama. Come on. Stevie Wonder.
It's very true. But see, that has to do with a style. You see, and a style is just not a gesture. A style is a form of struggle against white supremacist bombardment and preserving your dignity and humanity in such a way that you can bequeath it to the next generation when you don't have no money, when you don't have no land, when you don't have no rights, you don't have any power that can change your situation, but it can maintain your spirit. And when the immigrants get here, they get ADOSified too.
Yes.
Culturally, musically, psychically, and so forth. You see what I'm saying? And so we have to also bring that to the table, because that's what it means by keeping it real. That's keeping it real. Now, I would argue this, and you all tell me what you think. I argue first that as an American citizen, everyone ought to have a right to a job with a living wage, Medicare for all. That's why I work with Brother Bernie and the others. They ought to have decent housing. They ought to have high quality education, no matter what color. Black folk as citizens ought to gain us access to that, and then reparations in addition to that. In addition to that. Now, see, that's two rails working. Now, what would you think about that, Brother Tom?
Let me say this. I believe that every American has a right to a decent living. The fundamental problem is that we're bordered by two countries that don't really adhere to the same immigration policies. I go to Mexico. You get nothing if you go to Mexico. I know I haven't been to Canada, but I've read their immigration policy, and they don't really accept people too much either. What I kind of believe is happening is that we're trying to create an America that the politics didn't really advance to. So while I do respect that, I believe it comes after reparations. And I think that the reason why I say that is because you can't fix a man that just got here if you ain't fixed the man that built here. And so Black Americans, ADOS Americans, need an identity chaser, identity lesson about why and what mattered. So many of these artists, you saw Snoop Dogg, I don't want to see no more slave movies. Well, you don't want to see no more American movies, because this is America, baby. And most of the time that America existed, it was a slave nation built by Black folks. You see so many Black folks, Blacks and Indians. No, Indians owned 15% of the Cherokees were slaves. So Blacks and Indians, the way you think about it, isn't Blacks and Indians the way it happened. So I do believe, let me say, that I want everyone to have a decent quality of life.
Right.
The question becomes, do we have the immigration policies, the interest set up for everyone to reach that? Let me give one last example, Dr. West.
Mm-hmm.
I read one of the saddest stories that I've read in a long time last night with the Aunt Jemima story. I personally believe that the Quaker Oats has been wanting to change the name of Aunt Jemima for a long time, and they just weaponized this whole Black Lives Matter and everything else, just like white liberals to me in many ways, to activate a plan to get away from Aunt Jemima. Not only because of the need to get away from ADOS now, but also because there's lawsuits and litigations about that face on that syrup bottle. Well, they didn't want to pay for the gravestone of the actress. Okay. The family sued them and basically had no representation during the lawsuit trying to sue Quaker Oats. But you know who got lawsuit representation by the NAACP? DACA. So while you're representing DACA, you can't represent the family that's suing Aunt Jemima, because you might need donations from Quaker Oats. So the reason I'm bringing all of this up is I think one of the things that happens is with the two rails is one rail is altruism, meaning if I'm here from DACA, I came here illegally, everything you give me is extra. You don't owe me anything. You're giving me everything extra. But one rail is debt. So our rail is basically a rail that goes to the root of the country. So what happens far too often is that you will use the rail that's altruism to avoid the rail that is debt. And that's what I saw far too often with the Sanders campaign. It's not just that if he had advocated for reparations, and I talked to Killer Mike about this, talked to Nina, if he had advocated for reparations along with this, I'm fine. But what I heard is that I'm only going to advocate for the general, everyone should be right. But inside of that, what you're really doing is stabilizing white folk. I guess for me, the problem that's happened, and it all comes back together, whether it be the example I used with the asylum in Minnesota, or this example with Bernie, is far too often what happens is if we don't say nothing, ain't nothing gonna happen. So when ADOS, everyone tries to talk about there was going to be a reparations discussion. Go look at NCOBRA. They're talking about something other than reparations. They're talking about giving all the Africans something. But in addition, 3 people at a chair, at a desk, at some college is not a reparations movement. A reparations movement puts 1,000 people in front of the Supreme Court steps to support Byron Allen as he sues for Comcast for stepping on the rights of not just Black folks, but again, like you said, Dr. West, all folks. But there was no NAACP, there was no DACA, there was no gay rights activists, there was only ADOS in the front of the steps. So I guess I think we've been doing that the whole time. If I had to take we've been doing the 2 rail thing the whole time. That's how we got the Immigration Act. There is no Immigration Act without the Civil Rights Act.
That's right.
Is everybody else doing 2 rails though? Are the gay rights activists? Are the DACA activists? I don't think they are. They're doing 1 rail, and that rail is just for themselves, aside from the 2 rails you even set out.
No, I hear what you're saying. No, this is rich dialogue, brother.
Yes, it is.
You got me wrestling with these things because see, on the one hand, we do know that even on that 1 rail, if everybody in the country had access to Medicare, that's going to have a wonderful impact on a whole lot of poor folk, including Black folk.
Including Black folk.
No doubt about that. And that's part of our struggle with some of our mainstream politicians. You know, Brother Clyburn, I love the brother. He was a hero in the 60s, but he receives more money from big pharmaceutical companies than anybody. So he's not going to be for Medicare for all. So when he steps up and provides that support for Biden and others, you say, well, wait a minute here now. We've got these politicians who are extensions of big pharmaceutical companies, big private insurance company, big banks, Wall Street. They can't be free. They can't speak their minds. They can't sing the songs the way Al Green sings. Now,
Come on.
they're gonna have to deodorize it. So all the funk just gets deodorized. So no, ADOS is funky. We with Bootsy. We with George Clinton. We with Betty Davis. And Betty Davis was, the wife of Miles, who was a funk master herself. They wanted to stay together for a year. She was too much for Miles, but that's just extra little information. But she's a funk master. But that funk is about the love, the reality, the freedom, the service, the sacrifice, and the willingness to give it all in that way. And so I hear what you're saying. I just think that what we don't want is folk to start spreading these lies on ADOS as if somehow by being focused on reparations, that we don't have an embracing element that goes back to the best of our history. I hear you saying we are going to focus on this rail because we know that this rail is going to provide fundamental wealth and then also be connected to self-respect and self-love. But we're still going to be all embracing so that, because you can imagine, you see, anytime you have a major movement, especially in a historical moment like this, all the lies that's continually coming at you.
Yes, it is.
To disempower you and trying to get people to misunderstand what you're doing and misconstrue. That was one of the reasons why we had that dialogue in October. You know what I mean? And if you have another in October, I'm going to be at that one too, because I just want to make sure that the best of what ADOS stands for is projected, because the truth and the condition of truth is always to allow suffering to speak. And ADOS is allowing Black suffering to speak, to raise his voice. Now, I go back to Randall Robinson. We used to meet once a month, Trans-Africa, focus on one issue, reparation. You remember his book, The Debt, that he wrote as the founder of Trans-Africa? We met with Charles Ogletree. We went to court over Tulsa, 1921, trying to fight for reparations. We lost that case. But so we got this history, as you know, and tried to create it on the ground. But ADOS now is able to generate a level of grassroots activity that I think.
And let me say one more thing that ADOS has done.
Sure.
One other thing that is a subtle thing, but it's huge.
Yes.
None of these reparation movement ever, to me, recognize the importance of the Black church. I want to give a special shout out to Dr. Kevin Cosby.
St. Stephen's.
St. Stephen's and Simmons College. Because what I think everybody doesn't understand, and I've seen this, we had our discussions with Nicole Hannah-Jones at the New York Times. They came to the conference in November. They do a reparations piece now and leave us out. Okay.
Wow.
Leave us out. But in addition, even in the November piece, it was far too much about xenophobia when it left out the reparations component.
Absolutely.
Not entirely, but that's the movement. Reparations, we got a Black agenda. Our Black agenda is for all Black folks, not just ADOS, components of it. So now let's get into Dr. Kevin Cosby and the Black church. Dr. King comes out of the Progressive Baptist.
That's right.
Dr. Kevin Cosby has aligned ADOS, whether people understand it or not, with the National Baptist Conference. We're talking millions of Black folks that go to church across the country.
Yeah.
ADOS conference does not happen without those Black folks that you saw and shook hands with and spent time with, all of you guys.
That's right.
So my point is just to say this. What ADOS was also doing, the Angela Project, before even we started pushing ADOS, was aligning these Black folk with Jimmy Carter's convention, the white folk, and trying to make a national discussion about the debt owed to ADOS. But the problem that you run into is nobody ever anchored ADOS. So we didn't have to talk about being American descendant of slavery before 65 because there were literally little to no Black immigrants in America. According to Smithsonian, according to other books, I think Hamilton. There's a book that Yvette is doing, the remaking of Black America. She's doing it for the book club. So you just when you said Black in America, it meant ADOS, bar few that came voluntarily for school. I know we have Shirley Chisholm. I know we have Marcus Garvey, but these are nominal numbers. According to Smithsonian, before 1960, the amount of black immigrants born, that foreign born, was to the right of the decimal, nearly invisible. After we moved from 65, we start seeing this jump of Caribbeans primarily between, and it's not a large jump until we get to 80. After we get past 80, we start seeing the West Africans as well. So there's large sums of black folk that got here 15 and 20 years after Jim Crow.
Yes.
Now, the point I'm making is this. I'm gonna tie it all together. Can we pull up the timeline chart, Chris? Because I want to make sure that we frame this discussion. When I started thinking about the concept of ADOS, I didn't vote for Barack Obama first or second term. I did down ballot Democrat. I went to UCLA and I saw black immigrants, and I have nothing against them. I just saw that you're not going to do anything for black folks. I just couldn't tell black folks until afterwards. Dr. West, you told them the first time. Up front, you told them. So when you look at this chart, it's what I saw in my head, and I had to kind of express it. I created this chart. When you look at the history of this nation in quadrants, 1600, 1700, you have it in front of you, Dr. West?
Oh, Lord, yes, I see it, my brother.
1900. What people have to understand is the longevity of slavery, because we use the word, but we don't understand the longevity. And that's why I'm bringing up the 4th of July. Let's tie all this together. We're slaves for almost all of the first quadrant, all of the second quadrant, all of the third quadrant, and into the 4th quadrant, because they really didn't stop slavery. We didn't until 1942. You get the Roosevelt order. You got Jim Crow right after slavery, even if you want to use the Emancipation Proclamation. We've been free for this little time after Jim Crow. I guess what I'm saying is this is the conundrum of 4th of July. Maybe we can bring it back here. This holiday, this nation is built out of our very blood. It's built out of not only our labor, but the value of using our bodies as currency. A single slave with 3 years of field training was worth more than a house. So now it's an interesting thing because we're told that we should not be able to celebrate it because it's been so horrendous to us. Well, we didn't make it be horrendous to us. We suffered the consequence of that. So now this is the thing that reparations starts to deal with, because it goes past money, is how to rectify that so we can celebrate our accomplishment for coming through all of this. And I don't know. I look at, it's funny because we talked about this. You can take it off the screen. We talk about this bourgeoisie class. You get black folks that had millions of dollars. You got Steven Jackson with the blackout. You got Ice Cube with the tweets, and they're telling black folks that live ordinary, impoverished black lives to not celebrate the red, white, and blue. But you've been living the best of America. And I think that I just say everybody has to step back and listen to somebody else's life before you judge their life first.
That's true.
Second of all, look at your own life and be honest about the achievements and the progress and the advancement of that life. Because if you went from the ghetto in the ghetto all the way to making movies and to being a rock star and all that, that progress sits on the back of Dr. King. It sits on the back of Frederick Douglass. It sits on the work of Cornell West. It sits on the work of Sandy Darity. It sits on top of ADOS. And I think this is the discussion. This is the layered discussion of where do we go next. And I think that what your obligation is, and that's why I try to hone it down, is to demand reparations for the rest of Black America. And that's what I feel my obligation is.
Well, no, I'm with you in terms of fighting for reparations. I'm not giving up on that, and I think it's got to be crucial. I think it's got to be fundamental on those two rails that I'm talking about.
I feel it.
And we always already on those two rails in a certain sense, but it's so easy to downplay the reparations rail. I think for two reasons. So one is that, you see, almost any mainstream Black success has been selected by the white power structure.
Come on, Doc.
And there are certain issues that you can never touch. One is Israeli occupation, for example. If you want to tell the truth about the Palestinians, you better get ready to catch hell. Or if you talk about reparations, you better get ready to catch hell. So when you talk about corporate media, it's going to be hard to find some free Black folk want to speak in such a way they acknowledge what ADOS is doing, or acknowledge what the critique of Israeli occupation, without being anti-Jewish. You just standing up for justice. If there's a Palestinian domination of Jews, you stand with Jewish brothers and sisters. There's the Israeli occupation of Palestinians, you stand with Palestinians. If you say something like that, you're going to catch a whole lot of hell. I mean, like, again, we're just talking about this Minister Louis Farrakhan, when he said Hitler is wickedly great. That's what he said. He's great in wickedness. But all the press said is he's a great man. Once you say that, you tarred and feathered.
But so, Doc, let me
say, no, quit lying on the brother. I don't agree with a whole lot of things, my dear brother, Minister Louis Farrakhan. But when he said that, he gets twisted. And I tell you, reparations in some ways is an issue that is such a challenge that it's hard for mainstream Black people to really raise it without them getting worried about their jobs, their position, their situation.
Come on.
It's just a fact. So the question becomes a spiritual issue. How free are you gonna be? If you trying to get John Coltrane to play in a military band, he ain't gonna play my favorite thing. He just not. If you want Al Green to sound like Tony Bennett, he ain't gonna sing Love and Happiness the way he wants to sing it. And so it is with our spokespersons, our writers, our intellectuals, and others. And so there's got to be a way of putting pressure on them. Now, at the same time, and I'll stop here, we all would want to acknowledge Malcolm X's mother from Grenada. He's the greatest of the greatest.
Yes.
But he fell in love with ADOS. He was awakened and loved by an ADOS brother named the Honorable Elijah Muhammad from Gut Bucket, Jim Crow, Georgia. Stokely Carmichael from Trinidad. He fell in love with ADOS, but always embraced. Shirley Chisholm, Farrakhan himself is Caribbean, but ADOS is at the center of what they're talking about without them being against other Black people. That's part of, I think, what you all have been wrestling with in terms of being misunderstood, lies coming at you, people trying to dismiss you, but you keep coming on stronger and stronger. But I'm going on too long. But
no, I just wanted to add to this. If you are going to have people lie on you, what it can't be is people you invited into your group. So let it be a white conservative that comes from Jim Crow South. Don't let it be a West African, Ghanaian, and Nigerian that is at the Times or the Post on the backs of ADOS. So what do I mean? You know what happens if ADOS sets. You know that you probably out, because the reality is then you got to start writing on Nigeria and Ghana, and there's not a lot of interest there. I don't know if we understand what tribalism is and scarcity and how you move. We don't understand that because we never moved that way. We had the scarcity, but we moved with like there was abundance. Meaning we had scarcity, and when we was talking about Ford factory jobs and they was talking about bringing in immigrants, we didn't stand up and say, don't bring no more Latino immigrants. We kind of just said, we'll be neutral. We even went as far as saying, we'll advocate for you and actually wear your outfits and everything else when it comes to Black immigrants. But I don't know if we really understand that. Look, we've had in the last month, in 2 months, since George Floyd and Minnesota, we've had massive amounts of Black folks come on TV and talk about slavery and Jim Crow. But almost all of them don't come from ADOS. So what is the apparatus that's created this? Because I don't know if we understand. There is no Indian that would be, let me say this. One thing, I've interviewed Mercer Baradaran. And one thing I respect about her is her recognition that she isn't ADOS, that this is you guys' story, that I'm telling it, that I'm doing it from a place of respect. We didn't set up the right apparatus for Black immigrants that come from either the islands or particularly West Africa to pay that same respect. So part of what we're running into is that we're the first people to tell them, you are an ally, but you are not of us in this struggle. What we know when we look at the numbers in the late 1800s, Black slaves in America were 3rd and 5th generation. Slaves in the Caribbean islands were still new Africans. They would work them to death. It was a vastly different slave experience. This is not about the oppression Olympics. It's saying that what you find is that we are a mix of slave and slave master because of the way that the institution was operated. I'm saying this all just to come back to it because I don't respect good analysis or critiques, but the problem ADOS kind of runs into is I don't know if there is any. I think sometimes it's just a critique because of what we do, not only to Pan-Africanism, but also to the positionality of a Black immigrant in America. Because all of a sudden, let's look at Barack Obama. Let's use him. He's a classic example. Half white, half Kenyan. The white line comes through Confederate soldiers. If Washington Post covered this, without ADOS, Obama doesn't become president.
Oh, no doubt about that.
The reason why I say that
he doesn't become president without Michelle.
Agreed. Same thing. But the reason I say that is there is a love-hate with ADOS that goes to the same conundrum of the 4th of July. They love, like you said, they love the Motown and LeBron James and all of that.
Right.
The love for ADOS was so strong that I argue we watched the Hussein off of Obama. We made him so American that he was no longer abnormal. He was as normal as apple pie. What reparations does is it forces you to feed the rest of Black folks some apple pie. See, I'm looking at this thing and I'm seeing everybody not really make the connection that Barack Obama was an abject failure for Black America. Darity put it in numbers on the Atlantic. Cornell put it in theory on the TV and in different articles. I'm saying this to you because while Black folks lost wealth through homes and he didn't save Black folks and told us that reparations was unreasonable after getting elected on the backs of Black folks, white folks got a security line in quantitative easing that made retirement millionaires that now are going to transfer that wealth to Gen Xers and Gen Zs so that they can live great lives. We got to understand that now, and I guess my thing is, let's come back to your 2 rails and the 4th of July.
Right.
My thing about the 2 rails, Dr. West, and the 4th of July is, I don't know, on one hand, how many people are using the radicalness of not wanting 4th of July for your reason versus just being radical to avoid the reparations discussion. In addition, I don't know how many people, and you see it with Black Lives Matter. You know, I have my critiques. I believe it's an All Lives Matter agenda with a Black Lives ADOS Matter name tag. What you see is that rail is easier. It's you can be on that other rail of all people and still get corporate sponsorship, go write for Vogue.
That's true.
You can do that. Rail is easier. So you do that rail, but you sell it through this rail. And this rail actually never exists as a result. And that is the conundrum that ADOS runs into because we got to build the rail and ride the rail. The reparations rail.
Wow. Y'all want to jump in? I can talk to this brother until Christmas.
Yeah, we can talk all day. I'm sorry to dominate all this discussion.
But I don't want to dominate things. But
this is
fire. Get
I appreciate it.
Let me ask one last question of Dr. West, because I know we don't have a lot of time. Dr. West, there's a big thing that I have my own opinion about. They're talking about defund the police. My belief, I did the documentary Freeway Cracking the System with on Freeway Ricky Ross. We got the Nicaraguans on camera for the first time ever, nominated for an Emmy. The Nicaraguans admit to complicity. They say the government, if you didn't get a chance to watch it, it's on Netflix. They admit on camera that the government didn't tell us to sell it, but they didn't make it hard.
That's right.
So what I'm coming to with the defund the police, to me, there's steps to this. There's identity, there's reparations. Then we can start talking about defund the police because then Black folks have money and they can have organizational meetings to make sure that the police, when they're defunded, represent their interests. I believe it's putting the cart before the horse. But I want to hear your opinion on defunding the police because I'm already seeing it in the ghetto. You move the police out and Black folks that work for a living all of a sudden are left without police because you didn't do it in an organized way where they wasn't going to use it as a budget cutting scheme. So you don't have budget because of COVID. And so this is an easy way to get out of paying for the police that you owe to Black folks, to Latinos, to white folks that are poor. But now I'm left as a Black person that's working poor. I go to work every day to be here in the middle of a community that's on fire with no police? What is your general take on it all?
Yeah, no, this is so important. I mean, the thing is that you see, when you have this marvelous display of demonstration in the street and so forth, you got to be clear that you have a strong enough vision such that your slogans are not going to get domesticated and diluted. Now, when I think about defunding, I mean, the U.S. government has already defunded the police in terms of policing Wall Street. They hardly have any resources for policing workers who need protection in terms of not just their rights, but environmental issues. So when it comes to defunding, it always depends on what the context is in terms of your priorities. They've been defunding programs for Black people since the 70s, beginning with Carter. That's what the neoliberalism was all about, right? So that when we just come out and say we want to defund from below, which is to say we want reallocation. I was just talking about this with Brother Bowman. Y'all know Jamal Bowman, who I endorsed. You know, he's going to Congress now, right? He's gonna get a lot of play like AOC and so forth. It's gonna be very important to have dialogue with that brother. And he knows that, you know, I'm with y'all in terms of we're gonna have to have a flow because he's gonna be in Congress, right? And he's a strong brother. And he says, well, we're talking about reallocation of resources, but you can't take the funds away in such a way that the people are not protected. They've got to be protected, but you also must have funds for various other activities and services in that community so that 75, 85% of your budget is just police, and you have no programs for the young people. You have no kind of services for the old and so forth. And so the whole issue of defunding has got to be viewed in such a way that it doesn't become a right-wing project. The right wing has been trying to defund police and don't have any services or any police at all. It can't fall into that trap at all, you see. And yet at the same time, I believe there's got to be community control. You got to have what Brother Baraka, the Mayor Baraka, have, which is a civilian oversight. But of course, now they're taking that to court. He passed the bill. And now they take it to court and trying to undercut that because they know it'd be Black people having some kind of oversight over these police. So that it is a nuanced and complicated issue, my brother. But we have to be very clear that our fundamental priority is the protection and the respect and the allocation of resources to Black poor people. Massive investment must go to Black poor people. That's one of the strongest arguments for reparations. Because I think another thing too, you see, given this moment that's happening right now, the Black bourgeoisie is going to cash in on a bonanza. And the question is, will Black poor people, will Black working people get in on all of that money flow? Because all you got to do is constitute a threat to the corporate elite, and they white guilt starts flowing, and they just start throwing money everywhere. And you say, well, wait a minute now. We want to make sure that these resources get to the very peoples whose body in the street made it possible. And that's where the issue of the moral and the spiritual that raises issues of class. A lot of people, you know, come down on me for being so hard on not just Barack, but the black bourgeoisie as a whole. We know E. Franklin Frazier's classic of 1957, right? It's an indictment of the Black bourgeoisie because they're obsessed with the white normative gaze. They're obsessed with trying to make it in the mainstream. They're obsessed with status. They're obsessed with superficial, frivolous things. It's what in the Negro National Anthem, what they call being drunk with the wine of the world, as opposed to being in the world, but not of that world, because you're tied to a cause, not a brand. You're tied to something that has to do with enhancing people's lives rather than just you living up the big life, you know, or large, living large and so forth, you see. And so those are the kinds of issues that Adolph's, in pushing this issue, generates discussions about everywhere. So people say, wait a minute, Lord, Adolph's raising some serious issues about who really benefits, where this money's going. We talk about 1% of the population on 41% in America, but 1% in Black America on how much is the Brother Jones?
Oh, we talking about the top 10% has 75% of the Black wealth, the little Black wealth we have.
Wealth. Absolutely. So you say, wait a minute, something's wrong with our priorities. There's nothing wrong with everybody trying to live a decent life, but greed is promiscuous. It'll lie with anybody, any color, any group. And the question is, where's the service? And where are the voices that are raising these kind of issues? And that's what one of the reasons why that I'm blessed to always be both in dialogue with y'all, but fighting with y'all on these issues, even though, again, you know, we may not agree on everything, just like a whole host of other organizations that don't, you know, shoot, I'm Baptist and I don't agree with certain Baptist church down the street. Black.
Hey, Dr. West, last question last question that everybody has for you, I think. And, you know, we didn't even get the chance to get going because of COVID. COVID kind of put everything on pause. And it's looking like Biden gets to be elected just on not being Trump. We know Biden's history with incarceration. He is the architect in many ways of the carceral state. So we got a choice between Biden, who might also choose Kamala Harris, who created truancy laws in California. And we got a choice between Biden and it's looking like Kamala. We don't know who he's going to pick, and Trump. We advocate for down ballot Democrat. And the reason why we advocate for Democrats is because across this nation, whether black folks want to accept it or not, they don't have wealth. And the liberal policies that Democrats generally advocate for allow for black folks to get programs and different things they need. That's just what it is, whether people understand politics or not. I want to know what you're saying about the presidential choices now that we got. I haven't heard.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, no, we got a choice between a neo-fascist catastrophe and a neoliberal disaster. And is a disaster better than a catastrophe? Well, I'm thoroughly convinced that Trump is a fascist. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is that this is not just rule of big money, Wall Street, uncountable, not just rule of big military. 53% of every $1 goes to the military-industrial complex, even before you even had a discussion. Both parties vote for it. You watch how they're going to vote for this defense budget coming up in the next few days. Pelosi and McConnell vote for the same defense budget because it's bipartisan support of the military-industrial complex. And so it's a tough situation, though, brother. You know, it's what Henry Highland Garnett said in 1837. For black folk, it looked like we got Pharaoh on both sides of the bloody Red Sea. So what
that's why we say down ballot Democrats.
Now, I do think that a neoliberal disaster is better, though, because fascism means that, you know, we going to jail. You know, they gonna kill us. You know what I mean? Y'all just remember what we looked like, because that's the kind of viciousness white supremacy has shown toward free black people who tell the truth. That's just a fact. So that Biden has those possibilities, but it's less likely that he'll go that far in terms of the complete disregard of rule of law, because he's got some black politicians, neoliberals, who will be upset with Tone and others of us disappearing. You see what I mean? So in that sense, I'm just being real. So in that sense,
don't put me first on the disappearance list, Dr. West. Dr. West.
You said, what happened, Brother West? He logged on. He vanished. Holy Ghost plucked him out. No. These motherfuckers killed me. But I mean, the thing is this, that there is a difference between neo-fascism and neoliberalism, and we don't have a strong. So I can understand you voting down ballot, but I would push you on this one point, my brother. In those swing states, in Ohio or Florida, if it makes a difference. See, I'm in Massachusetts, so you know Biden's gonna win by 30%. So I could vote for Tone. Right, brother Tone on him. But
or Adolf.
Real tight. See, the fascism right now, especially what we saw in Mount Rushmore, you know, and the Klan who created the sculpture and so forth. You see, this stuff is really just escalating in a way that is just way out of control. So I do understand the down ballot thing. You know, brother Eddie Glaude argued the same thing back in 2016 on that.
We seen that.
And see, I'd gone with Jill Stein because I knew I couldn't support Hillary at all. And I was in a state where it didn't make that much difference. She didn't go to Wisconsin and so forth anyway. But I mean, what we've got to do is somehow ensure that your voices are more highly visible in the conversation and talking about legacies of white supremacy. We talked about that in Kentucky over and over again. That's going to be very, very important. It really is.
I'm done. That's all my questions. Thank you so much. I think that I don't know if they wanted to say something towards that.
Yeah. Well, one, I know when grown folks are talking, I was taught to be quiet. Okay, so thank y'all for an amazing dialogue. Kim, Moya, do you have anything to add? Jump on. I know we had one or two questions that came from the chat, but we don't want to take Dr. West any longer.
No, I got as much time as you like.
Okay.
Especially hearing from Sister Kim, though. Absolutely.
While you guys are on the topic of the presidential election, this is for you, Tone. Is there any chance of flipping Biden or getting him to agree to a Black agenda? And at that point, would you activate ADOS behind him if he came out with a set agenda?
This is the issue we ran into. One is the buzzsaw of COVID. There was a whole goal to try to push for him to come to the conference, but all of that gets killed, and now you don't have those statements from Biden. Biden saying what he said on Charlemagne's show is not Biden saying that same statement about any kind of policy on the debate stage. What we're seeing right now is that the very moments that you need where he's out speaking and ADOS can actually, like, kind of like what we saw with Hillary. I interviewed the young woman that walked up to Hillary with the super predators.
Right.
You don't have those moments. In addition, you have this whole energy that Dr. West just pointed to misconstrue ADOS so that we can't have the discussion. And so ADOS gets cornered for being the only people that actually will say what Biden's history is. ADOS gets cornered for only people that want to recognize that Kamala Harris, just like Barack Obama, is not ADOS. That's not about being divisive. It's about being the truth. You can't be African American and be Jamaican American and Indian American. That doesn't make you African American. This term was created for the progeny of American slavery because we don't know what part of Africa we came from. We know that. If anyone knows a Belizean or a Jamaican or a Han, they all know that they're not African American at home. But somehow she became, I guess, the second senator that was elected that was African American all of a sudden. And the reason why this is so problematic now is that as we try to interject back into the discussion, the way that we were framed by ABC, the way that we were framed by the New York Times creates a problem trying to get back with the campaigns because we're going to ask the hard questions. There's a reason you go on Charlemagne's show instead of coming on Tone Talks, because on Charlemagne's show, you're dealing with the guy who first of all, is willing to take 15 minutes. And second of all, ain't going to push back when you say all kind of stuff that doesn't make sense. Whereas when you come on my show, I'm going to know numbers. And I'm going to ask you about numbers. And when your numbers are wrong, I'm going to call you on those numbers. I'm not even talking about being mean, or I'm going to ask you about your legacy and your legacy. I'm not going to allow you to tell me before the show, say, we can talk about this, but make sure you don't talk about the fact that he created incarceration. That's not an interview about Black folks. So the question, see, Biden is a very interesting case, unlike Bernie in a way, because I thought that Bernie, through Killer Mike and through Dr. West, you can engage a discussion that doesn't attack his very history politically. Our discussion as ADOS confronts Biden with his own political legacy. He was built out of a moderate stance that he could basically swing the party back right. He's built out of that. ADOS is transformational. So being transformational, we're going to look at the end of the interview. Do you remember on the Charlemagne interview, he says, well, I think it was the Charlemagne one where he said the Indians. He said he got to include the Indians. Well, ADOS is going to ask, well, the Indians own slaves. Why would they be included? They don't want that moment. So long story short, I in an ideal world, we would be able to swing him further left. The problem with reparations is that I don't know if he's far left enough already to really get there. You also have stopgaps like Clyburn. You have stopgaps like the CBC. You have stopgaps like the NAACP. You need all of these different lanes to also be advocating not only for reparations, but advocating that ADOS exists. What you have right now isn't just a problem with Biden. Literally, these people are saying ADOS is not a unique group. They're saying we're just all Black. They don't want to tell y'all. They're saying we're all black. We all have to advocate. That's what Project Takeover is with the NAACP. Shout out to Princess and Gwinnett and everybody that's doing all their work with their chapters. We almost have a whole body of work to do that and undo at the same time while racing towards the November election. So I believe that if you could get him to swing in an ideal world, yeah, you could change your position. Do I think that's likely in a COVID America where he's already running 12 points ahead of Trump? No, I don't think that's likely.
But at the same time, you know, things are so unpredictable.
Yes, they are.
And you see, you know, I tell you, we got folk on the ground inside of these organizations, inside of these churches, inside of these mosques, inside of these temples. You see what I mean? And once that internal pressure is brought to bear, you'd be surprised how quick a complacent, timid leadership will shift just to be part of what's happening, Steve. And so I do think that is a possibility. We can't really just bank on it because we got to just work. But you just don't know.
But Dr. West, but the whole thing was what COVID has done is made it so the thing that we could have done to create more energy, to like ignite that energy, and then have the conference, invite them to the conference, get people to continuously say, you got to be at this conference, get him in front of a Dr. Kevin Cosby, a Dr. Cornell West, get him in front of an Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. That is all taken off the table. Now, in addition, listen to this, he's running too far ahead of Trump right now. See, it would be better if he was running closer to Trump or behind Trump, because now he needs the black vote in large numbers. Right now, what he needs is to make sure that the white vote doesn't turn on him.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So this is the problem we have right now, is what is his motivation to do this transformational project, and how does he see that will impact his white voters, not just his black ones?
No, that's true. Sister Kim, we appreciate that crucial question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
But the other side of this thing is, see, it's the we got that milquetoast black leadership tied to Biden.
Barack Obama.
Well, but it's all the other ones, the young ones all around him too.
Clyburn, the
you know
CBC.
What I mean? They all around him too. You see, and you say, good God. And some of them, you know, are decent. And of course, I love all of them. I'm a Christian. I try to love everybody. Thank God for grace and everything. But I put some strong pressure on him because he is looking to see what they have to say. Now, if we can get more voices in corporate media to raise the issue, then that will help shape the dialogue where even the questions that are being raised could be connected to what ADOS is concerned about. That's another possibility, but it's just it's hard to see exactly how that's going to unfold. You know.
Yeah.
It really is.
Hey, family, we have two questions.
Chris, do you have those two questions from the chat?
Yeah, I think Yamoy is going through them right now. Go ahead, fam.
Okay. Before I actually say, can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Before I ask these two questions for Dr.
We can't hear you, Moya.
You can't hear me?
I think he's talking, but we can't hear him.
I can hear you on our stream, but it doesn't sound like they can hear you in the live. So I'll ask a couple of questions from the chat.
Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. So
okay.
They can't hear you. So I'll ask the questions from the chat, and then if there's anything else you want, let me know. So the first question here we got a bunch of questions, but so the first is I would like to also get Professor West's thoughts about the ways in which intersectionality either strengthens or undermines ADOS advocacy for reparations.
Well, one, when people say intersectionality, you know, Sister Kimberly Crenshaw and others have put it out, the issues of race, class, gender, white supremacy, male supremacy, and class subordination, all of these things are happening simultaneously. That when you go to an ADOS conference, you already got large numbers of black women there. and they are free-thinking Black women, concerned about patriarchy and so forth. You already got people who are working class, poor, and middle class. So they already have concerns about class. The question is making sure that in the vision, we understand that the fight against white supremacy is always one in which class and gender are sedimented in it, part of it, constitutive of it, shot through it. And therefore, the issues of how you go about emphasizing one or another relative to a particular context becomes an open question. I mean, you know, domestic violence, you got to deal with patriarchy. Ain't no doubt about that. You got to hit that head on. Homophobia, you got to hit the transphobia, you got to hit that head on. Issues of, we talked about issues of class in terms of the bourgeois character of Black leadership. That is a class issue, but it's still connected to a struggle against white supremacy in which you argue strategically reparations gonna be the priority. And anytime you make a priority, you're making a selection. You're making an emphasis. You're acknowledging this is what we're putting a premium on. And yet you have to be sensitive to these other issues as you make that a priority, so that people don't try to paint you as if somehow you don't want to say a mumbling word about gender, don't want to say a mumbling word about class, don't want to say a mumbling word about homophobia, transphobia, or don't say a mumbling word about imperialism and drones being dropped and foreign policy and so forth. But once you make a major priority, and this is what I understand Adolf to have done, Adolf said, look, we right now are fundamentally committed to making reparations an inescapable, undeniable issue such that we follow through with policy and Black folk have their material conditions addressed in terms of wealth. That's what I understand they're doing. And that to me is still, you know, that's a worthwhile endeavor. It really is.
Let me add to that though, and say, I think that one of the things that Yvette Cornell has in all of her genius has allowed us to see is, whether it be gender or education or sexual orientation, the most consequential thing in this young woman's life is being Black. Born of sharecroppers, born in Georgia, every opportunity to step out and do the other rail. But we're going to build the rail that's going to advocate for the 32 million ADOS folks around this country that don't have the opportunity to go to Howard, that didn't have the opportunity to start a YouTube channel, that didn't have the opportunity to also many opportunities.
Right.
And so the one thing I will say about it is, as Yvette always points out, I think the one thing about the ADOS conference is all those people understood the most consequential thing in their life because of the chart, and maybe we can pull it up one more time. That chart that we show, the timeline, it shows that Black folks were slaves for almost 1, 2, 3 quadrants of these 4. And they were Jim Crow for another 100 years. There was no institution of slavery for women. They had oppression, but women owned slaves. We know that Dred Scott was owned by a woman and suing a woman when he started his lawsuit. We know that George Washington got his slaves from his wife, a woman. We know so many things. We know that the reality is that being an ADOS, not just a Black person, and I respect that there's oppression and colonialism. I respect that they have slavery in the Caribbean and CARICOM. I hope they get their wealth. But in America, this history tells us that ADOSness defines why you struggle so much, because America decided for George Floyd to get nothing, but Ilhan Omar to be invited. They have these documents, Dr. West. And one thing ADOS has done is public information. We take it and we show it to people. Every city almost has these documents where they're inviting Black immigrants. You got Louisville had one, the City of Commerce, the Chamber of Commerce creates it. We want Black immigrants. We want immigrants of all types. What they don't want, what they redlined out was ADOS folks. That is Blackness. That is the consequence.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is a fundamental fact that cannot be denied. The fact that Black people are so easily overlooked, downplayed, their plight rendered invisible, and therefore the easy way of being an American and gaining access to the mainstream is overlooking the plight of Black folk, and especially Black poor and working people. Now, that's just a fact.
Yeah, yeah.
That is the fact. And you see, you know, that to me, you can't love Black folk and just love Jack and Jill folk. Just put it that way.
Come on.
You see what I mean? If you're gonna love Black folk, it's got to be all the way down. It's got to be all the way across. It's got to be embracing. And the thrust of it has to be the folk who have been left out every generation since 1555. That's when the first one hits, you see.
Come on.
So
Come on. You're right.
Sense, you know, that this is a strong
1619.
What you're doing is a strong argument, though. I just keep putting back, you know, empire and class and intersectionality. So for all of those we know are very important, but we can't allow under our watch another generation to go where Black poor people and working people get completely pushed out with no access to wealth whatsoever, let alone the lack of self-love and self-respect. You see?
And we might not have that time anyway.
I don't think we do have that time, not only for the next generation, but just coming out of this COVID situation. I mean, the numbers are starting to come out.
Absolutely.
All the eviction notices that are ready to go to eviction code, it's all Black people, and the data starting to come. So what can we do to expedite some type of a Band-Aid, even coming out of this COVID? I mean, I lost my job, so, you know, I'm also in that category.
But so, no, I hear you. I mean, we've got to be part of some. Or first thing you got to do, you got to be organized. This is what Stokely taught us, and he's absolutely right. You got to be part of some organization trying to focus on that particular way, that issue, in ways in which you have some access to job mobility, job possibility, and so forth. And that has to do both with dealing with, you know, governmental challenges in terms of its dysfunctionality and so forth. And it's got to be, we need more self-organizing in Black America so that we can be supportive of each other. Because it looks as if the mainstream now is so undergoing hemorrhage. The mainstream undergoing hemorrhage. So we got to create some kind of relatively autonomous ways of supporting one another. And you know, whatever forms of Black creativity that takes, you know, definitely.
Well, we got to do it quick.
I know. I hear you.
Let me add to that. Marlon out of Chicago. Really quick. Marlon out of Chicago did he posted a great video from Edward Wolf, Professor Edward Wolf, economist. And what Edward Wolf tells us is there's a lot going on right now, and I'm gonna frame two things. So what we have to do now is understand the gravity of now. Not just that a lot of Black people are getting COVID. This is a transformational moment. Let me explain. Right now, 50% of commercial, like people who rent commercial space, Cheesecake Factory, Jay-Z and Rock Nation, people are choosing not to pay their rent. 50%. So then there's a fight between them and the people that own the malls, that own that rental space. There's a fight with them going on in court. Right now, 1 in 4 Americans at large lost their job. 1 in 2 Black folks. Even inside of that, what we don't get a story about is all the barbers and all the beauticians. You know, these come out of slavery and people move from the slave house to doing barbering and beautician. They've lost their job too. Not even counted in the number. In addition, we lost the secretary. We kept the Walmart worker. No disrespect to the Walmart worker, but the jobs that we kept weren't our best jobs. Now, also, at the same time, and this I'm going to get to a point that I'm making, the government is starting to back commercial loans. The government is taking the capitalism out of capitalism. It's funny how white conservatives can talk about small government until it's time to live the consequence of small government.
Absolutely.
So what I'm saying to you is that I think right now Black America is in the middle of an identity crisis itself, ADOS Black America, because there's a lot of Black folks that will start talking about, well, we don't need the welfare, and this is a welfare America right now. That's the gravity of a COVID that makes everyone have to wear a mask and shuts down all the restaurants and shuts down all the beaches and makes it so that everybody has to be inside. This is a different kind of moment. So I think the thing I say to Black folks, let me say this, like yourself, is control the controllables. Don't allow yourself to feel like a failure, because we grew up on the Cosby Show and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and we supposed to be something different right now. And understand that this is a transformational moment. And I feel like part of the ADOS responsibility, and you're getting it right now, is to create a community of other people to be able to release some of that, to be able to talk to other people that also have been let go, to be able to understand how you might be able to advocate together. Because walking into an NAACP meeting or calling Sheila Jackson Lee by yourself is not the same as 1,000 people showing up to the steps of the Supreme Court. So I say to you right now, we have to create the energy we've been trying to create, and we have done in some cases. You guys showed up at the HR 40 hearing. You guys showed up at the California reparations bill, which is birthed out of ADOS. This is the work. You're doing the work right now. Now, as far as the actual, can we get a check out of this? You know, I'm saying right now, they're just doing CARES and HEROES Act. That's what we've been talking about, is the reparation project. This is the imperative moment. It came earlier than we expected, but it's here now, where we need the wealth that we've been talking about, which is essentially, you got to understand, they love to talk about, and this is my problem with Bernie. Let me just say it to you. They love to talk about the wealthy white person as if he don't hire the next level white person that hires the next level white person.
Right.
The web of whiteness. So when I say that, I mean, top, you know, I gave you the numbers. Look, Cornell, 20 million Black families, only 350,000 break 1.2 million. This is according to the Federal Reserve. We don't really have a true boule class. We have crumb snatchers. White America has 83 million homes, and almost 15 million are worth $1 million or more, and almost 1 million are worth 10 million or more. They own almost everything in America. So now comes that consequence of us not having wealth, and we got to collectively demand for wealth. And those working poor and middle-class Blacks are starting to feel their connection, not to the elite of LeBron James' wealth or Oprah's wealth, to the bottom that you always were connected with, like Orwell said.
Right.
And this is where our fight starts to pick up steam. And this is why they're trying to diffuse ADOS. Because if we get collective, and then we start connecting with other groups after we set our own boundaries, we unstoppable.
Well, that's real. That's real. And then you got the possibility of strikes and boycotts. I know Brother Tefpo and Brother Mordecai and others, the new magazine they got boycott that's very important that Talib Kweli was connected to, so that even some of the folk who do have jobs, if they're in solidarity with folk who are losing jobs, and some kind of unity can be brought to bear, that's another form of pressure that can be brought, that can happen. I see various isolated pockets of that happening, because it hasn't fully begun to unfold in the way in which we're going to see in the next number of weeks and months. But you're right. But I do salute you, my dear sister, and praying for you in terms of how you deal with it. You got family and other folk who care for you and things, huh?
You know, not really. You know, working money, check like everybody else.
We got you, Kim.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, you got to. This is, see, if we really had the right kind of churches in place, that they would have some kind of cushions, because we've been through this before in the 1930s. You have some kind of cushions. That's what Father Divine was able to do. Daddy Grace was able to do. He provided all of these different kinds of services for free for people. They didn't have to worry about where they ate. They didn't have to worry about where they slept, and so forth and so on, because they had tremendous wealth, because they had thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of folk who were tithing 10% of every penny. So, but many of our mega churches are just reflections of the larger society. One person got so much money and everybody else giving, and yet they ain't got no prison program that's strong. They don't have a strong program for the elderly and the children, but the building fund and the leaders and so forth. So that we got to put pressure even on our Black organizations and our Black civic institutions. You see, we're going to have our sororities and fraternities. We're gonna have to step up. I talked last night with Brother Roland Martin. You know, he's an alpha brother, just like Donny Hathaway and Duke Ellington and Martin King and Du Bois and others. You see, well, the alphas, we got to step forward. The Omegas got to step forward. They got some cash, and we're not even talking about the upper black class.
And you know who else has to step up, Dr. West, is what you know from the data is we haven't also talked about boomers have to step up. Because what you actually see is that top 20%, pull up that chart one last time, Chris, with the blue lines. That top 20% that has 90% of the black wealth, that's pretty much pensioners and retirees. So these black boomers that have a daughter like the young woman that's in the chat, that they're gonna have to step up and pull out of those homes and those pensions to support the rest of the family, not because they were irresponsible, but because this is the narrative of the moment. You gotta pull the money out of your house and help your kid. You got to. Now, I don't know if you don't want to, but you got to. So I'm just saying that when we look at the wealth, we know that this 90% isn't black celebrities. That's a nominal amount out of this 90. This is black pensioners and retirees, their pensions in their homes. And I'm not saying that is right. I'm saying that the advocacy for government comes right along the necessity to recognize the emergency of the moment.
That's real. But that's what you could see, you know, how it's just a crime against humanity to allow the Wall Street criminals to get away with nothing and have the black middle class lose nearly 6% of their wealth, and other working people of all colors to lose their wealth. That's just a crime against humanity. And the fact that we didn't have enough voices to just tell that truth. All that predatory lending and market manipulation, insider trading, they got off with no punishment, no accountability whatsoever. Billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars way up at the top. You see, and
also,
let me say why I get upset. You know what that happens under Obama when he had that meeting with the Wall Street folk and said, "I stand between you and the pitchforks, but don't worry about a thing. I'm with you. Not one of you gonna get to hey." And they wonder why I get upset. Shoot, if I didn't have the Holy Ghost, I would have said some things that I know I shouldn't have said, because that's just wrong. You can't have black people voting for somebody, and then they get up there and they allow billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars to go to the top, and they ain't got nothing, and then walk around and want all this symbolic affirmation and things. And he ought to have symbolic affirmation in terms of his making history, but not substance. Not substance. And now we're dealing with this even more intense moment of emergency and urgency, and we don't have access to hardly any resources. And these folk out with 5 yachts and 7 homes and so forth. I mean, it's just sick. It's pathological.
And there are certain things out there, let me say, that you got to become aware of. I think what happens for the black working poor, particularly, let me even say black middle, is that you get accustomed to a certain line of thinking, I don't want any debt, this or that. But there's something called the EIDL right now, the economic like injury disaster loan. Mm-hmm. Understand that loan is something I've never seen before. They give you $1,000. It's the EIDL. If you look it up, if you're a worker that has a side business, you can apply. They put $1,000 in your account in 3 days with like a 1-page application. Then they give you an offer of a 3.25% loan. This is your government. That is not welfare. That is the reality of the reason that they're doing that. And again, even when you apply for this EIDL, the application is like maybe 2 minutes long. They're creating these programs because nobody is doing well right now. Go look into your government and what they actually have. Far too often we'll just say, I can't, and there's nothing out there. But there are things out there that we might not be aware of, and we got to share that information. And one thing I'm sharing with you on this program is the EIDL, because I didn't know. I applied for it and I was approved. You might be approved too, and this might put money in your account, $1,000 in 3 days from the federal government that owes you money that you pay taxes for years.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tom. And speaking of taxes, because I'm like, the government, they've got it backwards. You owe me. What about people who do have to pay taxes? Could we just do a strike of some sorts and just refuse to pay?
I wouldn't advocate for that.
Well, you know what happened to Brother Wesley Snipes.
That is an attorney, and I'm not your attorney, but
yeah, we love Brother Wesley, but he ended up going to jail.
I said my off mute.
He said he wasn't gonna pay his taxes. We said, brother, we're in solidarity with you, but he's gonna be in trouble, bro.
Well, that's one of the things they're looking at in the reparations plan, because it don't make no sense to heavily tax people who are making under $40,000 and not taxing the corporations that are making these millions and billions. Don't make no sense.
They paying zero.
Yeah, I agree. I've always believed that up to like 200, in addition to giving us actual money, I believe that ADOS people, if you go out there and you become a doctor or a lawyer or anything else and you make $200,000, you should be able to get that tax free as an ADOS person. That should be built into you. You shouldn't have to pay 40% tax just like everyone else, even if you want to split it differently. I believe that but we're not there today. Today, I'm not your lawyer. I would advocate everyone follows the law and actually pays their taxes.
All right. Heard it here.
That's nice, though, brother.
Fam, so I wanted to thank Dr. West, thank Tone, thank him, thank you, Moya, thank everybody who's here who has contributed. Thank Yvette, Cornell, who's also in the chat. And has been contributing to the discussion. We actually wanted to get you on, Yvette, so we will work on that for the next time. But thank you. Also, just if Dr. West, if you have any last words, if Tone, if you have any last words, in the sense that we are in a moment here, right? I think we all recognize that we are in a moment. I don't know how long this moment will last. I think we will determine how long the moment lasts, right? But if you have any last words, any last thoughts, anything that you want to share with the audience as we go out and meet with our families, or do what we got to do for this day and for the rest of the month.
You want to go first, Dr. West, or
just very briefly though? But I just want to say this is a blessing. I mean, this is exactly the thing to do on July 4th.
Yes, it
really is. We focus on the right issues. We focusing on the right challenges, and that again, the crucial thing is understanding that hope is as much a verb as a virtue. Curtis Mayfield said you got to keep on pushing. You got to be agitating, organizing, and stay in motion. Because if you're not staying in motion and you stop and become a spectator, you just overwhelmed.
Come on.
You're just overwhelmed. It look like, oh my God, I can't do nothing. You get paralyzed. And all of a sudden you can get into an Afro-pessimism kind of thing. And I appreciate the Afro-pessimists. I love them too. But you got to fight. You got to be a warrior. You got to be a warrior. So hope is staying in motion. And it's the love that sustains us in motion. Because no matter where we are, we got memories of a great people and great folk in our lives. And we have joys that the world can never take away. And that serves as wind at our back as we proceed. And then we keep the music at the center of it. Keep the music at the center of it, because that has been the fundamental thing that helps sustain us as a people. Now, some of us going to sing about Jesus. Some of us are going to sing about something else. Some of us going to sing about Allah. But keep the music, not just in terms of sound and noise, but in terms of the rhythms and melodies that allow your life to keep on keeping on. That's crucial. There must be spirituality in our movement in every generation, but it's different forms from one context and one generation to the next. And that's something that ADOS understands. That's why St. Stephen's is important. That's why the musicians are important. That's why the artists are important. That's why our sense of communion and community is very important. So when I'm with Sister Yvette, I just love the way she talks. That's just style. The way she talks has a spirit, a soulfulness to it. When I'm with Brother Tone, I love the way he linguistically and bodily moves. And both of them sharp as they can be. Both of them are activists. But you have to have all of that together. And it's important not to be ashamed of that, because that's in the end what's going to keep us moving. I know I'm going on much too long, but I appreciate y'all spending all
brother,
this time.
brother, we are blessed to have you.
I appreciate
We
it.
are blessed to have you. Tone, go ahead, brother.
Just two things. First thing is stay connected to your ADOS chapters. Join in our Twitter discussions. I know this is a tough time for everybody because of COVID. If you didn't lose your job, pretty much across the board, everybody took 20 to 25% pay cuts. I had to get a pay cut myself. It's one of the things that even Professor Wolf talked about will happen with capital, and it doesn't look like it's going to get better. Not the same thing negative. It looks like it's going to get worse as this time goes. And one of the things that ADOS will allow you to do is to connect with other people, so you don't just be at home, quarantined and depressed, but you're connecting with people on the political movement so that we can press for better outcomes and results. The other thing, you got Darity's book, FHTE, From Here to Equality. Pick that up because it's about reparations, but also I think more, even more succinctly is, I want to make sure I get it on camera, is this: we don't sell it. This is on the Duke website. My report I did with several economists, including Professor Darity, what we get wrong about closing the racial wealth gap. It was actually cited in the reparations piece recently on the Times. And in this thing, what we wanted to do, and I think it's important at this moment, is to have you understand what does not close the wealth gap. And that includes everything from just thinking home ownership. Of course, if you had a home, the wealth gap would be closed. Celebrity, Black family disorganization. It basically gets you out of the mode of being self-blaming to look at a larger system, because we're in the middle of a transformational moment. Right now, they're backing white business. Right now, they're backing white bad decisions. Right now, there's a fight between corporate real estate and corporate rentals. There's a whole thing going on around you that you didn't create. But what you can create is a safe haven for yourself so that you don't end up taking too much of that in without putting enough of that out. That's all I wanted to say.
Family, thank you, Tone. Thank you, Dr. West, Kim, Umoya Glass for organizing this. Umoya Glass with the 81 California team. Thank you. Thank everybody in the chat. Okay, thank every single organizer and activist that's been out there, online, offline, busting y'all ass. I know how hard it is, and I know how important it is that the work that we do on the ground. And, you know, like I said, I'm always honored, always humbled to be surrounded by such amazing activists. And today, to get this, you know, blessing to have Dr. West and Tone on. Thank you to Yvette Cornell. You've been an inspiration to me, and I know a lot of folks. I think Dr. Cosby is right. You are our Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s and our Harriet Tubmans, and sometimes we don't know that you're in the presence of greatness. And so I feel very, very humbled to even be a part of this, and I know folks here in the Sacramento group and also in the California group do as well, from the Bay Area to LA to SoCal to San Diego, and then from every single group that's across the country. And even if you're not in a group, right? If you're somebody who's fighting, if you're somebody who's active, or somebody who wants to fight and wants to get active, now is the time. We're in a moment, like we've all been saying, but I think we will determine how long this moment goes, right? And so let's make it last, right? All right, fam. I want to thank y'all. Please go have a good time. If you're off today, enjoy your family. Make this day what you want it to be. Thank you once again, Dr. West.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
We thought we was gonna have you for like a half hour. We are 2 hours in, man. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Is it 2 hours already?
2 hours.
Yes.
Almost 2 hours in. I think we should do this every single 4th of July. I think we should do this every single 4th of July. I think we should do something like this. And we would love to have you back, brother.
Now, Brother Tony, you all still gonna do the October thing, man?
Well, because of COVID, we're leaning towards not, because we can't put a bunch of Black people into a room and get them
to have. What about a Zoom thing?
We may do that. I mean, let me talk to Yvette and Dr. Cosby. Would you be interested in being part of a Zoom?
Oh, absolutely. No, you know.
Well, you might have just set it off, Dr. West.
You making news.
You might have set it off with a virtual. All right,
you know, whatever. But just trying to keep momentum. You know what I mean?
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Thank y'all, fam.
God bless y'all.
Thanks, Tone. Thanks, Dr. West. Tell Yvette I say hi, Tone.
All right.
Yes. Love to Sister Yvette too.
All right.